So Clement, please take ahead, introduce yourself, introduce your organization, and let's get started.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much. Again,
Yep.
Hi everyone, I'm Clement. I am currently a product manager at Blend. So Blend is a San Francisco-based startup that's focused on making consumer finance a lot easier. Outside of Blend, I'm also the co-founder of Product Manager HQ. It's a product management community. And so just to go ahead and dive in, for today's discussion, first, I'll introduce myself a little bit more, and then really dive into integrations. What is an integration? What is their purpose? How do they work? And how does it actually make your product more powerful, right? What does it bring to your product? As well as what are the challenges that you might face in building integrations with your product and how to mitigate those through best practices. And so again, I'm Clement. I have kind of accidentally fallen into product management. I began as an analytics consultant. Then I became a product analyst / data analyst. And then my management team asked me to become a product manager. And that's kind of how I became a PM before Blend. And then from there, I moved into Blend. And I'm currently leading new business initiatives there. So for example, our platform is really great at handling mortgages for consumers and for lenders. And I'm currently driving our home equity products, our home equity lines of credit and home equity loans. Outside of that, I've also written more than 60 articles at Product Manager HQ, and you can always find me on LinkedIn here. And I know that one of the topics that I get a lot when I'm speaking is, hey, how do I break into product management? How can I join you on this journey? And so for folks who are interested, I do have a book called Breaking into Product Management. It covers a good set of what does a product manager do? What are the skill sets? What does the day of a life of a product manager look like? As well as some interview questions and how to prepare for those. So to dive into the main event, what is an integration, right? So if we take a step back and we look at just the word integrate, the word integrate simply means to put together, to sum up, right? And the way that I like to think about integrations is a lot like this picture, which is you're putting all of these pieces together to work in tandem so that you can actually unlock a lot more value, right? Really, it's as easy as saying, I have some product and there is some other product that I want to be able to work with, and I want these two to work together, right? So it's pretty straightforward, actually. You can almost think of it like trade between two countries or as two people learning how to work together for the first time. So that's really an integration. And let's see, in terms of integrations, one of the things that you'll find with an integration is that the entire system, when you've actually put together all of these parts, the entire system is actually much more powerful than any one of the individual products, right? So one of the things that you see here on the right is a disassembled camera, right? A disassembled camera is nothing more than a bunch of plastic. It's nothing more than a bunch of chips and machinery. And each of these things in isolation doesn't really do anything. But when you actually put all of it together, it unlocks this new functionality of being able to take pictures, being able to zoom in, being able to store memory, share, all of that stuff. And so what I mean by that is that when you integrate things together, it really enables you to focus on what you are best at and enables your integration partners to be good at what they're good at, right? And so another example, which isn't displayed here, is, for example, an airplane. When someone's trying to build an airplane, some companies are really good at building engines. Some companies are really good at building seats in the plane. And some companies are really good at building the pilot controls to drive the plane. And it would be ridiculous for any single company to try to do all of that from end to end. And so by enabling each of these companies to simply specialize in one particular part of mastery, you can then integrate all of these together to create an airplane. And products are actually very similar, right? So the thing is, if you can focus on what you're best at, and you can enable others to focus on what they're best at, and you have a way for these products to talk to each other, you can integrate those together and create a much more compelling ecosystem for your end users. And so to really break down what integrations can enable for you as a product manager, it really gives you two types of capabilities, right? So one way to think about an integration is, oh, I'm going to take my product and I'm going to go find someone else's product to integrate that against. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. And the great thing about integrating with these third-party products is that your capabilities are now granted to their users, and their capabilities are now granted to your users. And so as an example, Google Calendar and Zoom both have an integration with one another. Google Calendar has the ability now to enable you to schedule a video meeting right within the calendar invite itself. And so Google Calendar now has the ability to enable video calls. And Zoom now gains the ability to schedule calendar events and enable people to edit it, to change the invitees, etc. And so that integration enables Google Calendar to do more stuff with video conferencing, enables Zoom to do a lot more with meeting scheduling. And so that is the type of power that you get when you integrate two products together. Another way that you can actually integrate is that you take your product and you integrate it directly with your customer. And this is especially relevant in business-to-business products. And so one of the things that you'll find is that for some businesses, they might have very complex internal architecture. They might have these platforms or these technical stacks that are really different from what the rest of your customer base is doing. And many times, product managers might feel the pressure of, oh, I need to build kind of all of the custom wiring from my product to theirs. But if you actually think cleanly about how might we be able to integrate these two systems together, you can actually unlock a lot more capabilities so that you're not the one on the hook who has to go and build all of these things for the customer. And so again, just to go ahead and dive in further. Oops, sorry about that. So again, addressing the first type of integration, there are products that can integrate to many other products. And traditionally, we call them platforms, right? And the platform really enables a single product to do a lot of stuff. So as an example, a platform product is Salesforce. Salesforce itself is a customer relationship management tool. It enables you to look at leads and convert them into opportunities and closes, etc. But Salesforce is actually much more powerful because it's a platform. So it enables you to connect to call center capabilities, enables you to connect to analytics, to customer service, to all of these different things. And so Salesforce is incredibly successful, not because it's just a CRM, but because it is actually a platform that enables you to connect to many things, right? Similarly, Slack is really powerful, not just because it's a really easy, chat messaging system, but also because it links into all of these different other products that make it so much easier for you to do all of your work in one place, right? It's integrated against Google, Gmail, it's integrated against Salesforce, it's integrated against Google Calendar. All of these things enable you to just stay in Slack and to do all of your work there, right? And again, with Zoom, the platform that we're currently on, there's also a lot of really powerful integrations there. And so the key thing to think about for a platform is that if a platform is integrated to many other products, that enables this platform to do two things. The first thing is that now they inherit all of the capabilities of the products that they're integrated with, right? Again, Zoom itself doesn't really enable you to send out invites for scheduling a meeting, but an integration with Google Calendar lets it do that. And so it gets a lot more capabilities that way. The second part is that you can get much bigger user bases because you're inheriting these user bases of your integrated partners, right? And so that's why platforms are something that investors are really excited to invest in, because you can actually see this exponential growth where the more products you're integrated with, the more users come to you, which then means that more products want to integrate with you to be able to get some of those users. And then now you get more and more users. It's a really beneficial effect of being a platform product by being able to integrate with a lot of different products. And then the second category that I mentioned is that if you know how to integrate against a customer's system, that is very different from trying to build custom development for a single customer, right? So the thing is, let's say that you have a particular product, right? And your customer says, well, that's great, but I need it to do all of these different things. I need you to go build all of this other stuff just for me, right? And one of the challenges there is the goal of a product is for it to be scalable, to serve many different customers at once. And so it's not good for you to build a single thing for a single customer, but at the same time, that customer is worth so much money to you because they're a really large account. And so you really want to be able to serve those needs. Well, the thing is, if you can actually think of their custom functionality as an integration, basically as some set of connectivity between your system and their system, now you can actually abstract away this middle connecting component. Now you have options. You could still build it yourself if you wanted to, or you could actually ask the customer to build to you by having this really clean way of integrating the two systems together. Or you could even ask someone else to go build that for you as a third party, right? And so again, this is really important for enterprise B2B software, where sometimes you just have to support really unique requirements for your product to work with their system. And if you don't do it, it could make or break your company. But at the same time, you don't have enough resources to go build all of these custom things just for that single customer account. So great. So now we've talked about, in general, hey, integrations are really powerful, right? They can either enable you to get a lot more functionality that comes from other products that are related to yours, or they enable you to build a lot faster and to serve your customers really well. But there are a lot of different things that can trap you with integrations. I think one of the things that people don't know much about is kind of the integrations product manager role is something that is, sometimes quite difficult to get into because there are a lot of different pitfalls that you might fall into, right? The thing is, whenever you're working within integrations, there are a lot of unique challenges that you might face that just aren't there when you yourself are the product manager for just your product, right? And so I want to go ahead and talk about 4 different traps that you might fall into. It's not an exhaustive list, but this is kind of the set that you're most likely to run into. And the reason why I want to talk about these is because I used to be an integrations product manager, and I still do integrations today. And I probably run a couple of dozen of them. And I've run into these traps all the time. I really wish people would remind me like, hey, Clement, remember that problem that you might run into? So I'm just kind of listing these out so that when you eventually decide, I want to make an integration because that will make my product so much more powerful, remember that there are downsides. And so just keep these in mind, and that will help make sure that you're successful. And so really the way that I think about it is there are 4 different kinds of potential traps. And so the first one is around strategy and prioritization, right? So how do I make sure that I am actually integrating to the right systems? How do I pick the systems that I want to integrate to? How do I prioritize this initiative, right? Another one might be, well, it's not really clear whether you're integrating to them or they're integrating to you or how that even works, right? Like there's no documentation, not really sure how to execute, right? So that could be a problem itself. Another challenge is lack of coordination, right? The entire thing about an integration is that by definition, you have to have teamwork and collaboration because you are trying to connect to something else. And so no matter what, this really requires you to be really coordinated with that other system, whatever it is. And then the final trap that you might run into is a lack of incentives.
Clement, I think we lost you. Clement?
Dive into each one of these 4 in the next set of slides.
Clement,
Sure.
we lost you for like 30-40 seconds. Could you please repeat from the lack of incentives part?
Yeah, for sure. So sorry about that. So again, from the lack of incentives, so what can happen is that your management team might say, well, I don't really know what an integration is. I don't really want to fund this initiative. I want to build other features, right? So they may not feel aligned with your prioritization of an integration, and the party that you're trying to integrate to, they may not be incentivized to build with you. Like maybe they have other features that they're trying to build. Maybe they have other systems that they want to integrate to. And so how do you make sure that you and they both have the same set of incentives so that you can coordinate together? And so in the next set of slides, what I'll go ahead and do is I'll actually discuss some best practices for how to tackle each one of these 4 types of challenges. And so in terms of strategy and prioritization, one of the things that I've personally had problems with and that I've seen other product managers have problems with is around, well, which system do I integrate to, and how do I think about the strategy behind integrations? And really the thing is, an integration itself is really a strategy, right? If I decide to integrate to some product, there is now some amount of new engineering work that my team needs to do. That is some trade-off. I now have to pay some cost. What is the upside benefit, right? And so you can't just say, oh, I want to integrate to everything in the world, because each net new integration is going to cost you something, right? How do you prioritize that? And I think the other thing too is when you're first getting started as a product manager, not only might you be excited about integrating to everything that ever existed, right? You want to boil the ocean, you want to do everything at once, but also sometimes you might get a partner who comes to you and says, hey, I want to be integrated to you. And you might just agree because you're excited that you want to work with them, but maybe they're not the right partner. Maybe they don't serve the same user base that you serve, or maybe their reputation is not very good, or maybe their APIs don't make a lot of sense, or the user experience isn't great, right? And so the thing is, when you're considering an integration, the entire thing is to consider it as its own feature that you're considering for your roadmap, right? What is the user pain that I'm trying to solve? Am I trying to solve pains for my current customer segment, or am I trying to reach new customers? How does that functionality fit into the rest of my product suite? How much is it going to cost me? What are the things that I'm giving up by chasing this integration, right? What is the cut line? At what point do I say, I no longer want to do integrations because there are other things that I should be doing instead, right? So the thing is, integrations many times can sound very, they can sound very intimidating to a lot of people, right? Because an integration, makes people think of, oh, I need to be so technical and I need to know how to get all of these different systems to talk to each other. That's partially true, but the hardest part of an integration is actually in the strategy, in deciding which systems do I want to integrate to and when, right? So I'd say in terms of best practices, treat an integration like you would any other product. What is its value to you? What users are you trying to serve? What problem statement are you trying to address? And what is the cost? What is the sequencing where it fits into your broader product roadmap, right? So this is how I think about addressing the challenges that might come with how do I strategize and prioritize my integrations?
I would like to add one more point over here from my experience.
Yeah.
So good that you mentioned the example of Salesforce. So in my past company, that was Rakuten, I was working as the global Salesforce manager, where I was basically responsible for all the things that you're saying right now, like integrating with the third parties and everything.
Yeah.
So Rakuten has its presence in Europe as well. It has presence in Japan and Americas as well. So, and Europe has this strict laws that the data cannot be stored outside of the countries. And
right, GDPR, yeah.
Exactly, GDPR. So because of that, while choosing the partner, I also had to consider that if I'm integrating, do they have their data center in that country?
Right.
Where actually this allowed me to integrate multiple softwares, but that is necessary. That's the top priority. So I would recommend that you also need to have your own priority, and law has to be respected everywhere, and especially in Europe because the fines are extensive. Yeah. So we almost integrated one partner, and then we decided, no, we cannot go ahead because of the data center issues. And everything.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is like something that I learned in my career, but it's very important when it comes to laws and everything. So please check that. And then we have to move ahead with the partner integration.
Exactly. Yeah. You mentioned a really great point, right? It's not just which users am I serving, but what constraints am I under, right? Like if there are data sharing problems, if there are privacy problems, even if there might be user experience problems, right? So one of the things that I run into is if you have two systems that are integrated to each other, and one system is trying to be iframed into another system, right, where you show a different user experience, is that the same brand? Like, does the user have to re-authenticate in, re-log in? Like that feels all sorts of weird. How do you address those challenges? So yeah, like there's just, again, the thing to think about with an integration is it's not just a thing you say yes to and you execute against. It really is a full product, right? It's a full set of features that you're unlocking. What are the constraints that come with it? What are the costs that come with it? Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Very true. Very true. We also have a question over here. It's like, is it easy to convince a third party to integrate with our product? So basically, you are trying to promote your product to some other third party. So is it easy to convince the other party to integrate?
That's a great question. And so when we think about, how do we get a third party to integrate, and this is actually a little bit further on in terms of incentives, really, it's all about value propositions, right? It is about return on investment. What
Very
is
true.
the benefit that someone's going to get versus the cost, right? And so when a third party thinks about integrating to you, these are the things that they're thinking about. What is the additional revenue that I might get? What is the brand value that I might get? What are the user bases that I might get? What are the new functionalities that I get in my product, right? So here are all the benefits, but then there are the costs, right? So how hard is it going to be for me to integrate, right? Like, what are the user experiences, the data stuff, the law stuff, all of that privacy stuff, right? And on top of that, do you have the documentation? Like, who else has actually integrated to you before?
Very
What
true.
are the APIs? How do I actually use these things, right? And so the thing is, it's all about benefits and costs. There are multiple ways for you to position yourself to be a really strong potential partner, right? So again, if you're Salesforce, right, like you have so many users, everyone wants to integrate to you, right? And so like it almost doesn't matter how bad their documentation is, which, by the way, it's not bad. I'm just saying that like it doesn't really matter if it were bad. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter how bad it is because the upside is so strong, right?
True,
and on the flip
true.
side, like, let's talk about, for example, Stripe. So Stripe is a card processor, right? It enables you to swipe cards. And the reason why Stripe is big right now is not because it had a big user base, but because its documentation was so dead simple, right? So the thing is, it was super easy for any engineer to basically write in the Stripe integration. And so everyone decided to use Stripe, and now Stripe is huge. And so you can win on either side of that market by either being super easy to implement, so the cost is really low, or by being so valuable in terms of user bases or features that everyone wants to integrate to you. You can take either of these strategies, you can do them together, you can focus on one, and those are all things that can enable you to position yourself to integrate with others by having others want to integrate to you.
Very true. Very true. And sometimes, like another example I would like to give you is of Domo. Maybe you already know it's a company based in Utah, and it's a BI platform, visualization platform, basically. And something similar is done by Slack as well, that they themselves are providing this integration platforms. So for example, Domo makes it very easy to just like 3-4 clicks away. You can integrate your Excel sheet, you can integrate MySQL, you can integrate BigQuery, and they will show the visualization. So if you are capable enough, put the efforts on your side, do the development on your side by using third-party APIs, and let the users integrate whatever products they're using it, which actually makes it much more powerful. So Slack is not dead today because they are integrating so many third-party products, such as Google Drive, like Excel sheets they can import. They can also, like, now they have started enabling their own video calls and everything. So definitely that also becomes a very much big asset if you already provide multiple platforms from your side to integrate already. Yeah, that has been like the game changer for many companies.
Yeah, again, I think one of the things that you see a lot in United States-based venture capital is everyone is looking for a platform to invest in. People are no longer looking for single point solutions to invest in, right? So no matter what problem you're trying to solve, at the end of the day, someone's going to ask, well, what is your integration strategy, right? Like, how do you unlock all of these new capabilities that you yourself, you don't have to build, right? Because again, the thing is, if you have this really clean way of letting other people write code to connect their systems to yours, you're no longer constrained on writing code to get from your system to theirs. Now you can scale exponentially because you no longer need to hire additional people to gain new functionality. Other people are giving you new functionality by writing their code against yours. So again, that's why a lot of people are focused on, well, how do we eventually get to an integrated product?
True, very true. Well, I guess we should move ahead with the presentation now. We had a good discussion around it.
Yeah, for sure. And so I'd say, on a very related point, right? The thing is, if you haven't done an integration before, it can be quite hard to know, well, how are we going to make this thing work if it's your very first time, right? And so as an example, so again, there are potentially two ways in which we talk about integrations. Your team could be building against some other party. Some other party can be trying to build against you. And so first off, a potential trap that might happen is, you say, hey, I want someone to build against me. But if you don't have all of your documentation ready to go, it's very hard for them to know how to do that, right? And so the way that I think about this is it's a lot like trying to cook like a a 5-star meal without the recipe book, right? It's like, if you say, oh, here's this very fancy dish that I would really like you to serve, and you give people no ingredients and no instructions, they're going to say, I don't know how to do this. And so then whatever they make is going to look really bad, right? And so, what you want to do is you want to give them the recipe book, right? And so the thing is, let's say, oh, this other system wants to create a user in your system. Well, great. You should go ahead and write, here's every single step that you need to do to make a user, right? Here are the different things that might happen if you create a user, right? Like you might not expect that, when I create a user, all this other stuff happens, right? So what are all the downstream effects of them doing that? What are the caveats? What are the permissions that they need to use? All that stuff. So that way, when you give them all of the instructions and you also give them all of the recipes of like, hey, here's how you make this thing, then they can be creative and they can go ahead and build all of that into your system. And that's just so much easier, right? So, really make sure that you're really clear. The way that I like to think about actually working with, other parties is to think of them as my own team, right? And so it's, if I told my own team, hey guys, I want to build this thing, right? I want to make sure that they have really clean, user stories, technical documentation, downstream effects, business context. And I should give all of that to my third-party integrator as well, because they're basically extending my product. They're basically trying to get their stuff to work with mine. And so I should give them as much information as I can, right? And I think one of the things that happens is people feel, oh no, but it's a third party and I don't want to share my company secrets with them. And it's like, well, yes and no, right? Like just because they're integrated with you doesn't mean that they're stealing any of your functionality. They're not stealing your users. You guys are doing this together in partnership, right? So really provide such clean integration documents that, your own team would use it if they had to build the same thing, right? So, be really crisp and clear. And on the flip side, let's say that you are trying to build to other systems, right? One of the things that happens is, let's say, oh, well, I just need to build this thing to that thing once, right? And so you build it in a very hacky way. It's very quick. It's very dirty, but like, hey, it works and we got it out the door. And then you find out that some other customer says, oh, well, I need that too. And here's a different system that I need you to integrate against. And you're like,
exactly.
Dang it. So then you do it again and it's really dirty and it's really hacky. And then you keep doing this and you keep trapping yourself, right? And you need to come up with a way of how do I scalably do this, right? So again, as an example, right? Like, let's say that you are an HR system, right? Like you enable people to manage their payroll, you enable people to manage their employees, right? But if you're some HR system, you have to hook into all of your customers' old legacy systems, right? And so what does it look like for them to send you an employee? What does it look like for them to set up payroll, right? Like if you can come up with very clear abstractions of, hey, this is the way that any type of employee gets created in our system. Here's the way that any type of pay gets created. Here's the way that any type of documents, such as like, pay stubs or W-2s or whatever, get created, right? Then it's very clear for how you're going to go build against other people, right? So that way, instead of trying to read the code and say, okay, if this customer, then this thing, but that customer, then this thing with this variable name, blah, 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 right? Like now it's just very clear. Great. I will always do it this way. And then there's basically some way for you to bridge the gap between your standard and the way that that customer is set up. And that makes it so much easier. And so again, I'm not a technical product manager, right? Like I came from, like, I have a biology degree, right? So like, I don't have any coding experience, but one of the things that you can do is ask your engineering team, hey, can we build an interface, which basically means there's all of these custom fields on one side and we want to make them standard. Can we build an interface to make it standard so that all of these custom things is always the same stuff that we always build against? And again, rely on your engineering team. This is a partnership, right? Like you aren't expected to build the whole thing yourself, but just ask your engineering team, hey, is there a way that we can come up with an abstraction, an interface to make sure that we're always building the integration the same way? So that's what I would say in terms of clarity of standards. It's if you are asking people to build to you, make it really clear how they should build to you. If you're going to build to someone else, make it really clear to your team, this is how we're always going to build to someone else.
Right. I guess we have another related question over here, which says that although integrations are accepted, sometimes they prove to be difficult in terms of analyzing efforts and resources required. How do you go about it? How do you validate the proposal sent by your team and received by others? So basically checking the possibility of the integration, if it is going to be beneficial or not.
Yeah, for sure. Great question. So I think, and again, this comes in a later slide around incentives. I think a lot of it is first, are you sure at the very, very start, are you sure that your team is going to get a benefit by doing this integration? And you can't just be selfish because someone else is trying to integrate to you, right? Like integrations are two-way. You need one system to talk to another. And so are they going to get a benefit by integrating to you, right? Because the thing is, if either of you don't benefit, someone is going to say, well, it's not worth my time. I'm going to stop, right? And now the other team basically is stuck. They can't do anything without you, right? And so, it's really important to make sure that both of you have, some sort of incentives so that you're both doing it together. And so I'd say that's the very first part, right? It's like, make sure that both teams are actually willing to dedicate, because what I typically see is not that the problem is, oh, well, we misestimated the initial effort. That's usually not the root problem. Usually the root problem is one team is not as excited to do it as the other team is. And so that then means that, people are not investing their full effort to try to make it go as fast as possible, right? And so I'd say it's really all about incentives and alignment. That said, it is, in terms of just like estimation, again, lean on your engineering team and on their engineering team and be transparent with one another, right? And so I think one of the things that can be very helpful is if you are gut checking each other. So if, your team is telling them, hey, I saw this set of functionality and this feels like maybe 3 sprints, they might say, well, we've seen other people do that and it's usually 1 sprint and this is how they do it. That can make your team go faster. And if they're sending you something and they're saying, oh my gosh, this is going to be something like 10 months of effort, you say, well, that doesn't seem right. Like, what about it is hard? Like, is there something that we can simplify for you, right? And so just be really transparent with each other. Why do you think that it's going to take that long, right? And just like work with each other as partners, you can actually decrease the cost that way. There might be something really easy on your end that you can do that makes it so much faster for them. They might be able to do something on their end that makes it much faster for you, right? And so again, I think like some of the core themes that I'm talking about, right, is basically 1, you both are partners, make sure that you're both going to benefit. And 2, because you're partners, share information with each other and you'll be able to help each other reach the finish line a lot faster.
Very true. Well, I guess we should move ahead with the presentation. Then we can go with the other questions. Yeah.
Sure. No worries.
Yeah.
Cool. Again, like this is kind of similar to what we just talked about, right? So, sorry, here we go. In terms of coordinating, right? Like you need to work with someone else. And it's just sometimes you aren't aligned on what is the timeline, what is the scope, right? Sometimes you miss particular details and like that messes everybody up, right? And so the thing is, again, when you're beginning an integration, make sure that everyone is coming together as a single team. What is the problem that we're solving for our joint end user, right? Because now you're both owning it. What's the value that we're both going to get? And what do we both believe the difficulty is going to be? What do we both think we need to commit in terms of resources, right? When you're kicking off with everyone together, think of it as kicking off your own product, right? So anytime you kick off a new feature, you typically, circle up all of the engineers, the QAs, the designers, the data analysts, and you say, hey, this is why this is important. And this is why we're going to take this much time to go do this stuff, right? And so similarly, you want to do that for everyone who's building this integration together. And then again, just treat them as part of your own team, right? Like set up a recurring stand-up just so that way you're sharing information with each other. And make sure you document your decisions, right? I think one of the things that happens a lot is, I might get on a Zoom call with one of my fellow parties, right? And they might say something and then I might miss it. And like now they think, well, Clement's got the information. So he knows that he has to build that thing that way. And I just don't remember, right? Because it was just in a Zoom call. And so the thing is just be really clear in your communications. I think just, after a meeting, somebody and typically that's going to be you because you're the proactive one, right? Like typically go ahead and send out your understanding of what just happened, right? It's, hey, we made these decisions. And so that means that there are these next steps that are owned by these people by these dates, right? And so one of the frameworks that we like to talk about at Blend is who, what, when, right? So it's who's on point to do what thing by what time. Make sure that you end every meeting with it and repeat it multiple times, right? So when you're wrapping up a video call, take the time before you end the call and say, hey, it was really great, chatting with everyone. here are the decisions we made. Here's what's doing what by when. And then send an email afterwards saying, hey, again, really love this. Like, we're going to meet up again soon, but just so that everyone has it, here it is in email. And then because emails get lost, take that and put it into Confluence or, Google Drive or whatever documentation system you have, write it again, right? And so it sounds like a lot of headache, right? Because it's like, well, I'm doing the same thing over and over again. But you'd be surprised. These types of proactive small steps of just over documenting and over communicating can literally save you months and months of time. And so here's a real example. I was trying to build, my system against, against some other third party. And we couldn't get it to work for like 3 months or whatever. And part of the reason was because my system was case sensitive, right? So if I have username in all lowercase, that's different from username with a capital N. But their system is case insensitive. And so they don't care what capitalization you use. And so they kept sending us really weird, like capitalized stuff because their team wasn't used to working with a case sensitive system, right? And so that kept breaking our system. And so that just took us months and months and months to diagnose and fix because no one said up front, hey, my system is case sensitive. And so I need you to make sure that you're using the right capitalization for your parameters, right? And so that one simple detail would have saved all of us multiple months, right? And so it's really the devil's in the details. Just be really, really clear about what are the constraints that you're working with.
Very true. Very true.
Great. And again, I know we've touched on this again, but just for thoroughness, going to go ahead and talk about it again. Sometimes your partner doesn't want to build with you because they think, well, it's not really worth my time, right? Like they're just not, it's just not a priority for me. And on top of that, businesses are always changing, right? There's always the changing landscape. And so I know, many of us today, our priorities have been changed by COVID-19, right? And so there are many initiatives that are no longer important that used to be important, right? And so the thing is, it's not just that your partner needs to see you as valuable. They need to see you as valuable throughout the entire duration that you're building out this integration, right? And so if their priorities have shifted, you need to sit down with them and say, hey, how can we make sure that our priorities are still in sync, right? And similarly, you yourself might actually see a shift in your own priorities, right? And so again, many times I see there are teams that say, hey, I want my product to be a platform. And so I'm going to expose all of my functions into these APIs, basically easy to understand ways for other systems to go use them, right? I'm going to create all of this public facing documentation. And then all of a sudden, that's no longer the priority and the team stops doing it because there are other things to do. Then other people can't build against you. And you have to be aware that you're making that conscious trade-off when you say, I'm going to stop doing this, right? And so again, it's make sure that you and they both have value propositions. You're both getting more benefit than the cost you're paying, and you're prioritizing it together, right? This is either your first priority or your third priority or whatever. Make sure that everyone is aligned on, great, this is what's important, right? And then on top of that, be creative with how you share value with one another, right? So I know that, multiple times I've been in positions where I might say, oh, well, if you don't finish this, then I'm going to punish you by making you pay me money. And if I don't finish it, then I'm going to pay you money because I messed up, right? And yeah, that's one way you can write a contract. But there's another way you can write a contract, which is called revenue sharing, right? So let's say that I want all of these powerful functionalities that I don't currently have, and I have a really big user base, but my partner has all these really powerful functionalities and they don't have a really big user base, right? And they are currently being asked by other people to build, right? What I can do to convince them to prioritize me is I can say, well, if you build to me, I'll give you some % of the revenue that you unlock for me. And that now makes them want to work for you more than they want to work for other people, right? And so when you're working together, it's not necessarily about punishing each other. It's about how do we give value to one another, right? So be creative, right? Like you can share revenue. You can come up with ways where, users can get discounts for different systems. You can bundle things together. Just make sure that you two are incentivized to both do this together.
Right. We have a relative question over here. So it's like a lot of times management feels building is better than integrating, especially tech companies. What is your take on this? Like, which one would you prefer? It depends on the situation, but yeah, please answer. Then I'll share my experience as well.
Yeah, for sure. And so again, I think, that's kind of your traditional build versus buy, analysis, right? Like there is, when you look at the different ways in which you can do things, you can always build it yourself, or you can quote unquote buy it by integrating it, right? And the thing is, go ahead and do that full, analysis of what are the benefits of each approach, what are the cons of each approach. When you take the benefits and you divide it by the cost, what is the return on investment? No matter what, companies always want the highest return on investment, right? So it doesn't necessarily matter what the cost is, what the benefit is, whatever the highest ratio of benefits to costs is what you should be taking, right? I think there's another thing to consider in terms of strategic positioning, right? So the thing is, if your executive team is not used to building integrations, they might actually feel a little bit of fear of, well, now we're giving up these things that we perceive to be core competencies, right? And so I think there's a broader discussion to be had of, well, what is our core competency, right? I think, many times a product begins with a really tightly defined, this is the problem that we solve. And then when it becomes successful, it starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger until you think, oh, my product does everything, right? And now you have to realign your executive team to say, wait, we are actually really good at doing this thing. And other people are really good at doing that thing. And wouldn't it be great if we could invest our engineers to go focus on the one thing that matters the most, so that other people can go solve our other problems for us without us having to go build it ourselves, right? I think, again, there are, generally speaking, when working with executives, when they give you a no, or they say, I don't want to do this, treat them as your users. Like, do a user interview with them and ask multiple whys. Like, take the 5 whys approach, right? So it's like, I don't want to build this. Well, okay, tell me more about that. What are you concerned about? Well, I don't think that the party that we're integrating with knows what they're doing. Okay, fair point. Like, we can ask them, what else have you integrated to before? We can make sure that we give them good documentation. Does that solve your pain? No, I still don't think we should do this. Tell me more. Well, I think we should own this functionality. Okay, why do you think that? Well, because we have the best engineering team and we can always do this stuff, whatever. Okay, if we did this thing, what initiatives are you willing to give up? What do you mean? Well, if we have to build this thing rather than having a partner integrate their existing functionality to us, we no longer have the bandwidth to go do other stuff. Are you willing to make that trade-off? Well, maybe, right? And so now you have a conversation. Now you can start talking about, okay, what are the benefits of integrating? And what are the concerns about integrating? How can you address those concerns for your executive team, right? So again, a lot of it is objection handling. A lot of it is user research. Really go understand why your executive is not comfortable with your approach and use that to better understand, okay, how can I be proactive in solving these pains for them as we decide to move forward on this strategy?
Right. I guess that was a good answer. Let's move ahead. Yeah.
Great. And again, kind of ahead is just the summary. So again, integrations are just really powerful in general, right? And so again, they enable you to do a lot more because you can focus on what you're really good at. Now you can have other products, or you can have customers dictate how they want to loop in your product. And that enables you to get all of these new capabilities, all of these new users at a much lower cost because you can focus on what you're good at, right? But integrations are also really dangerous because they're a really different way of working. You're now working with other people. There are now new problems that you might not have considered before. And so just be thoughtful, right? Like, the way that I think about it, again, I'm not a technical product manager. I don't know how to code, right? And yet I've done dozens of integrations successfully. And that's because it's the soft skills that actually matter the most for integrations.
True that.
Align your partners, right? Like, you two are doing this together. Identify the user. Who are we trying to make their lives better? What is the pain that we're trying to solve? It? Why? How? Right? So like, scope it really clearly. Bring your full product management talents to life, right? Like, define the problem, scope the problem, align everyone in terms of incentives, make sure that you have the right estimates for timelines, work as a team, do retrospective, do stand-ups, etc. You got this. Like, all you have to do is be really communicative and be really thoughtful, and you can also build an integration. And that means that you're no longer on the hook to try to build the universe. Now you can focus on what you're good at. Other people can focus on what they're good at, and your users will all benefit together. So yeah, that's my presentation.
That's how you grow. That was amazing presentation, Clement. So we have a couple of questions over here.
Sure.
So first one is, how do you explore and discover in-house integrations projects? How do you find resources to integrate, let's say, Metabase to BigQuery?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of identifying again, where do you find the resources is actually almost a different question. It's a disguised question. And so the way that I think about it is resources are usually held because they are being used to serve some benefit, right? So let's say that there are currently, 5 people doing project A and 10 people doing project B and 3 people doing project C, and all of those have their own returns on investment, right? And the thing is, most times you're not able to take resources away from those because those already have known benefits, and those known benefits are already communicated to executive teams, were already baked into your financial projections, your forecasts, whatever, and that's great. And so if you want resources, it's not so much, well, how do I convince someone that my thing is important? It's not about whether it's important or not. It's about when you think about serving your company, what is the highest value thing to do, right? And if you find that your integration is higher value than project A or B or C, now you can have a really well-reasoned conversation of, look,
right,
because my project is this important, we need to deprioritize this other one and move those resources over, right? And it's an uncomfortable conversation because sometimes people's egos get in the way of, oh, but I was owning that and it used to be important. And it's like, yeah, but we're all here to serve our company. We're all here to serve our users. And so whatever is the highest importance is what you need to go do. And similarly, if you find that your integration is not as important as the other initiatives that are in flight, it's kind of not ethical for you to go advocate for your integration because those other things are more important, right? And so everyone should be thinking about how do we best serve our company and how do we best serve our users? And so you should use some sort of prioritization framework, right? And again, prioritization comes in the form of return on investment, right? And so I think one of the things that you can do is, say, for example, that you're trying to integrate to a data querying service. Well, one of the challenges is that like the costs are generally well known, right? Like it's usually, okay, well, here's all the documentation, here's all the work. And the problem is that its perceived value is not high enough. People will say, oh, well, it's data, whatever, right? Like for many not data-driven companies, they may not yet understand the power of data. And so if you can create a very compelling narrative of, look, you have these other projects and they would be way more successful if you had data because of XYZ. You bring in case studies of companies that have integrated to data and like been able to show all of these things and do all of these things differently, right? Then you can demonstrate that your value is higher, right? Because I think one of the challenges of product management in general is prioritization is an art. It's not a science. And so the thing is, everything is about perception. It's perceived cost versus perceived benefit. You divide those and you get perceived return on investment. And the thing is, if people don't perceive your product to have a benefit, then they're never going to invest in you, right? And so it's how do you change the narrative? And so, there are a lot of, and I've been in places before where, I had to fight my executives as an example to implement a net promoter score survey, right? Like I wanted to integrate to some other party so that way I could automatically send customer satisfaction surveys, net promoter score surveys, whenever someone completed their transaction on my website. And they fought me forever because they said, look, our customers are always happy. Like we always get like glowing reviews, whatever. I'm like, no, like if we actually understood what types of customers were really struggling and we could go serve them better, et cetera, et cetera. And that entire journey took months. But the thing is, that's because I saw the value of it, but my executives didn't yet see the benefit. And so I need to convince them that the benefit is high enough for them to staff this initiative versus some other initiative. And again, take your ego out of it. I don't care that it's my initiative. If someone else were doing it, I would say, great, go take my resources and go do it, right? It's just, I happen to need that thing, and that thing is really important to the company, so I'm going to run with it, right? And so the thing is, again, going back to the original question, how do I find resources internally to be able to do an internal integration? It's not, how do I find resources? It's, is this initiative a high enough priority? And if it's not, why not? Is it that the cost is too high? Is it that the benefit is not high enough? Is it that we just happen to have such high priority initiatives right now that we just can't do it yet, and it's a sequencing problem? And that is a better conversation to have rather than trying to fight for resources. But even if you don't have the resources yet, now is the time to do your research, right? Now is the time to go create your narrative of what is the benefit and what is the cost and what is the ROI versus the other initiatives, so that you can go pitch your initiative to your executive team.
And back it with data and projections. to make it more
Exactly.
valuable instead of putting your emotions into that. Actually,
Exactly.
I gave this talk a couple of weeks ago and it was all about data. So yeah. Well, we have another question, which is like, what is the best way to document slash map integrations that are already there to reduce dead links or unmaintained integrations? So
Yeah.
basically, what is the best strategy for documentation?
Yeah, great question. So I would say in terms of documentation, right? So, and I'm gonna go ahead and assume that this is for your own system for someone else to integrate against. First
Right.
off, there's this concept of API versioning, and so basically there are
Mm.
different versions of your system that you can have. And so one of the things that's very valuable is having a really explicit versioning system makes it very clear to your partners what capabilities you have in what version. And the other benefit of versioning means that then you can specifically say, I'm going to deprecate version 2.3.1 or whatever, because we've already had it on for too long. And we're currently on version like 5.6.8 or whatever, right? And so the thing is, you want to first think about, well, how do I actually say, what is the current state of my product? And what are kind of the different versions that I'm willing to support? And then from there, and then I think a lot of it is just kind of almost, how do I put this? A lot of it's basic hygiene almost. So it's like running, if you are not yet a mature platform and you do not yet know how to document your APIs really cleanly, you might have to go like manually test all of them and then go like delete all the ones that don't work. And that's painful. But the good thing is once you've already established this baseline, go ahead and write down the steps that you took to go test each of these APIs and automate it next time, right? So next time, when you're looking at, okay, great, we need to now, we used to be on version 1.3.1 and we're publishing 1.3.2 and we're not sure what changed. Well, there are two things. First, if you already have automated, runs of, okay, go check the health of all these APIs. And if anything's missing, go remove it, right? That will make your life easier. And the second thing is many times a product manager who is in charge of, their product as a platform, they don't actually own all the functionality. Like other people are writing APIs. And so like, I need to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And so again, like that is a coordination problem. It is not a technical problem. And so it's a lot of setting norms. It is, hey, when you go write that thing, please make sure that you post an update here so that I know about it. Not because I'm trying to be annoying, but because our other customers are using this stuff. And so like, I need you to do your part of the job if you want to put your API through our platform, right? And so a lot of it is just maintaining coordination hygiene of if someone else is doing stuff, make sure that they're reporting back to you regularly of, hey, I deleted this thing, or hey, I added this new parameter that you can ask, or hey, I changed the behavior of this path, right? So like make sure that other people and you all have good communication internally. And if you're doing stuff for the first time, it's going to have to be the hard way, but learn from your experience of doing it the hard way, of manually calling every API and figure out, okay, how do I automate this next time? So I can do like a quick automated check of which of these things still work and which of these things no longer work. So hopefully that addresses your question.
I think it addresses the question, and I would like to add, like before beginning the integration, also take care that what type of technology you're going to use to release the product. So, for example, plenty of companies are using Kubernetes, plenty of companies are using Docker containers. So you need to be having the alignment to create containers if you're using Docker, or if you're using like traditional way of Java, then you're going to use beans or whatever. But there has to be an alignment into that factor as well, like so that while releasing the product or while releasing some certain modifications in your code, you do it in a standard way that is easy to integrate by the new customers. That's the added point I want to add. Yeah. So we have next question, which is like, how do you handle scenarios when your partner who is equally big company wants a good share of the revenue from the customer? Example, you are in a situation where you can't charge more from customers for these additional capabilities, nor can you share the chunk of revenue which your partner is expecting. Maybe you ask the chunk to your partner. Yeah, please answer that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, this really boils down to a strategy question of what are the capabilities and are they worth it or not, right? So again, like say that you two, again, are in kind of equally, like you both are on equal footing in terms of negotiation power, right? And the scenario that you said, you can't charge the user anymore, right? But like this company, your partner, is not willing to do anything unless they get more money. Well, again, some questions to ask. Is your user base really valuable to them, right? Like, is that something that they can get in value instead of earning money from you? Because the thing is, every company wants to earn money, right? And so everyone's going to try to ask you, can I get some of that money, right? And so it's, okay, well, is it actually the money that you're worried about, or are you worried about something else, right? And so it's work together to understand what's valuable to who, because again, like some companies need integrations because they have a big user base, but they don't have the functionality. And some companies need integrations because they have the functionality, but they don't have the user base, right? So it's, well, what type are you and what type are they? And why are you integrating in the first place, right? And so I think, unfortunately, I can't answer your question very cleanly because a lot of the details and a lot of the nuance will come into play, right? So for example, have you two worked together before, right? If you're only working together for the first time, well, maybe ask them, okay, are you looking for a long-term partnership? Because the way that you're behaving right now makes me feel like you're trying to take advantage of me, right? And like, what if we could do these other projects together and now you're blocking me on this one project because you just want to selfishly earn money right now, right? So like, have you worked with them before, right? And if you have worked with them before, then it's like, okay, what changed? Like, why are we no longer able to work together before? And again, be transparent. The other thing you can say is, well, our customers aren't going to pay more. I can't get them to pay more. And so I can't give them that net new revenue. And now like I have to take a loss. And maybe they'll say, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought we were charging them. And it's like, no, we're not. Right. And so like that clarity is really helpful. Right. And so again, I think a lot of it boils down to communication and strategy. It's yes, this situation can happen. But the problem is that each time this situation happens, there's a lot of nuance and context behind it that unfortunately I cannot answer for you at this time because I don't know all the details. But in general, right, like what is your value? Like what is it that you're trying to do? Is it really the money that you care about, or is it something else? Like, are you actually willing to sacrifice revenue to go get that functionality that that company has, or to sacrifice money to get that user base that that company has, right? And ask the same of them, like, what is it that they really need? Like, is it actually the money that they need, or is it something else? Is it the user base? Is it the functionality, right? And so really try to understand what makes each party tick. Like, what is it that each side cares the most about? And then optimize for it, right? Because again, if I have a massive user base and no functionality, and someone has functionality and no user base, we basically don't even need to charge each other, right? Like I can get the functionality and like they can get my user base and like we're both happy and there's no charging to be done, right? But let's say that, you know, you both have equally powerful functionality and equally large user bases, whatever, like all of that's a negotiation. And so I would unfortunately have to tell you, it really depends on the situation of what is the thing that you're trying to ship? What is the value to the user, right? Like I would ask another question there of why can't you charge more to the user, right? So like, is the thing that you're building even valuable enough if you can't charge them for it? And then after you understand what is the value you're giving to the user, then how does that value get split between your two companies? And value doesn't have to be money. Value can be functionality, it can be user bases, it can be brand positioning, it can be top of mind, it can be user experience. There's a lot of different things that can be thought of as valuable to you and them. Right. So have that broader conversation and make it not just about the money.
Right. I guess that answers the question beautifully. We have another 3 questions coming up. The first one is like, if we are integrating too many features to a product, won't it be difficult for the users to understand the product and make use of it?
Great question. And again, that is one of the things that I mentioned back here in terms of strategy and prioritization. It is at some point, you will have enough integrations that adding more is actually detrimental to your user because now they're going to say, I have no idea what you're doing anymore, right? Sure. And so it's, you know, you only have so much attention from your user. You only have so much mental model. You only have so much screen space to show them stuff. And so it's, what is the most important thing, right? Because the thing is, one dangerous trap that I see a lot is people try to integrate the entire universe against them. And it's, if you do that, you are not actually providing value to the user. Like you need to have a perspective. What is the type of customer that I'm trying to serve? What is the pain that they have? And how do I address that one? Rather than trying to say, oh, well, if I integrated to service B, we could also have all this stuff, and service C gives all this stuff, we should integrate to all of them. It's like, yeah, you could, but that burns your engineering team. It burns your customers because now they're saying, I have no idea what this product does anymore, right? And so just be really thoughtful about what is the problem I'm trying to solve And does this integration help me address that problem? Because if it doesn't, I really shouldn't do it. Like, even if there are other things that I could do, that's not the mission of my company. It's not the mission of my team, right? I need to serve my user, and whatever my user needs is what I need to provide to them. And if they don't need it, why am I doing it in the first place, right? So I would say, again, be really diligent about your integrations roadmap, right? Like, and there are some times where like some integration is way more important than one that you already have. Like maybe you just need to spin that one down. Like maybe you just need to sunset it so you can support this new one in the higher position of priority. And that grooming sometimes needs to happen, right? So again, just like be really judicious. Think of it as your own product, right? Like you can't have infinite features in your product as much as all of us would love to have infinite features, because the user can't digest infinite features. So what is the feature set that actually matters to the user? And anything that doesn't matter, get rid of it.
Yeah, this reminds me of the story of Instagram. I guess everybody's aware. They wanted to build this full-fledged social network around photos. That was Instagram that was originally planned to. They built it, and then they cut down everything and kept only to post the photos, like it, and comment it. And that's the beauty of Instagram that made it a billion-dollar unicorn. Yeah, and to add to this answer, I would also say that after the integration is done, also think about the points that come with the integration, like announcing to your customers that this product has been integrated. And you should try using Slack. So if anything new that appears, so for example, the member is not present in a particular channel, Slack asks you what you want to do, whether to notify the new user or to add it to the channel. So provide that flexibility to the customer, that even that the integration will feel beautiful, not painful. So that is something to take care after the integration is done. Well, moving on to the next question.
Sorry, real quick. So unfortunately, we are an hour and 10 minutes in, and I do have another meeting coming up soon. So I think just one more question, and then I'll have to unfortunately.
Okay, so I guess this question is perfect for you to answer then. How did you come to be an integration product manager, and what are the professional advantages? Can it make you more freelancing client? This is personal.
Yeah, great question. So honestly, I think a lot of it has been pretty fluid. Like I did not explicitly decide to become an integrations product manager. What actually wound up happening was I had to build my first integration because I was trying to deliver some feature to my end user. And I said, I can't do this myself. Like I just don't have the internal capabilities to build this thing myself. Hey, there's something else that I can use. Mm-hmm. How do I go and use that thing to make it go faster? And I worked with my engineers and they said, yep, like that is the better path to take, because if we build it ourselves, it's going to take us forever. Great, right? And so I became quote unquote an integrations product manager entirely by accident. I think my entire career journey is almost entirely by accident, which is kind of funny. So I am an ex integrations PM. I'm an ex data PM. I'm an ex platform PM. I'm an ex, I'm an ex kind of user experience PM, ex mobile PM. Like there are a bunch of things that I used to PM that are no longer PM. And so I think a lot of it is just, if that is the best strategy for you to take it, even if it's something that you're not sure how to do yourself, because you have an engineering team and you have other people that you can rely on, whether it is your product management community or whether it's your own internal team, they can all help you succeed, right? And so I think, don't do what I did, which is like let your career kind of happen by random, right? Like be thoughtful in terms of what is it that I want to do, but also know that integrations product manager can be a full-time, like I will always do integrations, but it can also be really tactical of I need this one thing to happen and I'm just going to do integrations for this one thing, but I'm going to keep doing the rest of my stuff, right? And so I would say in terms of the advantages of being like a really focused on integrations product manager, one of the beauties that you see is that you get to look across the entire ecosystem. Like you get to look at so many different products and how all of them are built. And that just makes you a much better informed product manager. Like you see all these different patterns, all these different functionalities, all of these business partnerships. Like it really makes you so much more empathetic, not just to your user and your company, but to really the entire state of an industry, right? And so that can be very advantageous. I would say the potential downsides are many times an integrations product manager might wind up kind of almost project managing the integration. So it's like, oh, I have to get on this call, I have to coordinate all these people, et cetera. And you're no longer really focused on, I'm going to go do user testing, or I'm going to do all of this, mock-ups and prototyping, for users to look at, right? And like that can sometimes feel not so good for a PM who really wants to see their product in front of the user, right? And so like that's a potential trade-off, right? You're going to be taking a step into the background and letting your technology enable all of these experiences, but you're not the one who's going to build the experience yourself. And so that's a downside potentially, right? And so I think a lot of it is just, again, going back to the point of value propositions, what is the benefit that you perceive of being an integrations product manager, right? So you can become a lot more technical. You can learn how to work with engineers a lot more. You can work with a lot of different companies. You can see a lot of different products. You can see entire states of industries. The potential costs are, you might get pigeonholed. Like people might think, oh, well, they're always an integrations PM. So like, do you want to be that? If a company doesn't need integrations, are you still valuable to them? If they're so small and there's no integration market fit yet, maybe that's not a good thing to position yourself as. You might not be able to do user-facing A/B testing. You might not be able to do, prototyping and user interviews as much. But if for you the benefits are higher than the costs, go for it. And if you feel that the costs are too high, then don't, right? And again, one of the things to do, which is exactly what you're doing, so thank you and keep doing that, is ask other people. Like you don't need to do this yourself where you become one and then you regret it. Like ask other people, hey, why are you an integrations PM? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And use that to triangulate, what do I want to do with my career?
Right. So Clement, we are over the time. Really nice to have you tonight over here. It was really amazing and it was a different topic. And I hope that people listening to you have a really happy feeling about the integration PM role now. So really thankful to you.